And our next guest, by the way, has written a book on the short history of nearly everything paranormal and our secret powers of telepathy. So Neil's going to bring him up on the screen, I think, and we're going to talk to you about our next guest. There he is. Okay, great. I'm going to be introducing Dr. Terje Simonsen, discussing his research and philosophy of the paranormal going back to ancient times. He notes that while there is nearly 150 years of scientific research in parapsychology, the field is still marginalized within academia. Yep. He also talks about the responses to the paranormal within the field of theoretical physics and focuses on the practical applications of psi and on the personal meaning of psi-abilities. And as I said, his book is a short history of nearly everything paranormal, our secret powers of telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition. Hello and welcome. Welcome, welcome. Do you want to unmute yourself? How do I pronounce your name before I really get in trouble? Fix your sound, turn it on.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, beautiful.
I can hear you now.
Yeah,
How
thank
do
you.
I pronounce your name?
It's a Norwegian name, a kind of special, Terje.
Terje. Oh gosh.
Terje.
Terje.
Yeah, that's great.
Terje.
Yeah.
Okay, that'll have to do. Okay. Well, welcome. So we're so excited to have you here on Portal to Ascension today on this paranormal event. So tell us a little bit about how you came to start doing all this paranormal work, your background.
Well, on the personal level, I have heard stories from my family, telling about strange things that was not in, say, the official map of reality. For instance, my grandfather, he was able, and that was back in the days before mobile phones and all that kind of technological stuff, he was able to hear my grandmother about half an hour before she was approaching the house. So, and she could come home at different times. It could be 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, but he would get this auditive, say, kind of telepathic signal. He would hear exactly how she would approach the door, go up the steps and open the door into the living room, and then there she was not. But half an hour later, she would come in exactly that manner. And that became kind of regularity. So when he heard this phenomenon in Norway, it's called a Norwegian national phenomenon. It's called the Vardøger, a very old traditional, you can find it in old records back to the Middle Ages and so. He became so used to this that when the Vardøger of my grandmother was appearing, he went to the stove to start making dinner, because then he knew it would about half an hour before she was home. So that kind of things. And he was a rational man. He was not a hippie smoking cannabis or using LSD or anything. So he was a machine engineer, and he had never set his foot in kind of religious community or anything. So he was extremely salt of the earth person, very down to earth. So I trusted his, say, telling of that kind of tales. And also my uncle and aunt in a close by city, they had some of the same when they were sleeping in the bed. My uncle started speaking in his sleep, and if my aunt was reading a book, it would happen that he was saying the exact words that she was reading in the book. So yeah. So that kind of stories, and they also were rational people, not kind of ecstatic or on drugs on anything, and many kind of that stories. So I had to try to somehow make sense of that, and I was a member of a Christian community, youth community at that time, and also some of my friends spending a lot of time in prayer and meditation. They had also kind of special manifestations, to put it that way. For instance, a friend of mine, she was going to the USA, and she did not have money for the ticket, and that was many, many years ago. So she started praying God for money for that ticket, and that would, at that time, it would equal about $500 from Norway to USA at that time. And suddenly there appeared a check in her post box of exactly $500, you know. And that was she found out it had been sent from her brother living in the Philippines, but they had not been communicating on the phone or anything. So he would have no normal way of knowing about her need for exact that amount. That kind of storage, you know. And they multiplied over the years. And as I said, I was part of the Christian community, but within the normal Christian horizon, in Norway at least, they tended to say this must either be the work of God or the work of the devil. And I felt that would be quite limiting perspective, because some of those people say experienced these things. They were not really saints or anything, you know. It would have been other people that somehow would be better served by experience these phenomena, having more need for the money, for instance. Food is more important than a trip to the USA, mostly, and such things. But other, say, a ditch here is you could not ascribe this to the devil, because the phenomena were not evil in any way. It was not kind of chaotic poltergeist or flames suddenly bursting out of the walls or like that things. It was a neutral to positive phenomena, most of these kinds of things. So then I started to study esoteric traditions, you know, the Sufism, the Kabbalah, Hermeticism, the Golden Dawn, of course, Crowley, but other magicians also. And of course, Rudolf Steiner, Madame Blavatsky, and all the great esoteric teachers. And later on at the university, I got as a mentor Norway's foremost expert on occult and mystical traditions, Professor Jan Erik Ebstad Hansens. And if you go to the University of Oslo, his publication list contains more than 100 different items. So he's really well versed in, say, the scholarly tradition about the occult. And he suggested to me for my dissertation, I wrote about anthroposophical tradition in Norway, Rudolf Steiner, the Waldorf school, and all this kind of his branch of theosophy, which is usually called anthroposophy. So then I made my dissertation about that, and I also started to study parapsychology, the science, the laboratory science about these phenomena. And then I also got some very interesting experience with professional psychics. I very often tell a quite simple tale. I was going to a date and I asked an old traveler before this date, can you tell me something about what will happen and so? And he told me, oh yes, she likes you quite a lot and it will be very nice and so. And then he said, and I can also tell you, this woman is 1 meter and 64 centimeters tall. And I think, okay. So I went to this date and became very nice. We chatted along. And of course, I couldn't keep myself back. So during this date, I asked her, by the way, how tall are you? And then she said, 1 meter and 64 centimeters. So, you know, it was so stunning. How could he know that? So next I called him up and say, how did you know this? And it turned out it worked a way like if you put a search word into Google and then say you put Joe Biden, for instance, just to make a person everybody would know about. And then suddenly appears lots of information more or less relevant for your search word, which is Joe Biden, lots of his biography and his opponents, and yes. So, and then it struck me, so this psychic field of ours, it seems to work like a kind of mental internet. And then I somehow coined the word, the mental internet, because we are used to thinking inside the box. We think that consciousness is just something I have inside my head, or you have inside your head, or has inside his head, and so on. So, but if we instead make a switch there and consider consciousness as a shared field of information, which in we all participate, just like logging on to the internet, then it makes much more sense with these phenomena. Then, in principle, all information ever, say, loaded up on this vast mental field will be in principle available for everybody being sensitive enough to perceive it and to download it. And also following the metaphor of the internet, we will be able to exchange telepathic emails with friends and family and other people we care about, and so the mental internet appeared. And this guy, this old traveler, I was quite impressed, and so I asked him, "See, it seems to you be able to read my mind then?" "Oh yes, if you're a good channeler, I can do that," he said. And then I wanted to put him to the test once more. He was then on holiday out in the Atlantic Ocean on the Canary Island, and I was home in Norway. So it was no natural way he could know the answer to the following question. And I said, now I will visualize the front of my house, which is an old house. It's a white house, and in the middle it's a big blue double door. And say the traditional door in this part of Norway is not blue, it's green. So if he somehow know our local traditions and try to be smart in a way, he would say from my dialect, and aha, this guy lives in district in Norway, and typically the houses are white and green or something like that. That would not be possible because it is a breach of the rules to have blue doors in my district, really. So I said to him, no, I will visualize my house, make an inner picture of that house, and you please tell me, what do you see? And I started visualizing a house with a big white wall and the blue double door in the middle. And after a couple of seconds, he said, I perceive something white and I perceive something blue. So he got the date right on the centimeter, and he got both of the colors of my house right, just like that, not being able to check with, say, Google Maps or any kind of technical device or something like that. So then it struck me, these things are for real. Of course, I've experienced, as I said, spontaneous phenomena with my family, and also read lots about it, and people in my Christian community telling about this. But, you know, just on demand, he delivered these results. So that was quite stunning. And then I think I somehow found out I have to do something, say, scholarly about this. So that is my personal and somehow my scholarly, say, what is called incitament to start doing this book.
So that's actually quite profound. Do you, like how you tested it, you researched it. When you said this old traveler, was that like a kind of word, or was just you were referring to this guy as a traveler? Or was he
no, in Norway, it's probably in many countries, we have two kind of people having this what's this called? They travel about. There is what used to be called the gypsies. Some of them prefer the Roma, but many still prefer gypsies, in fact. And it's the traveler community, which in Norway is called Tatar. And they are not, say, dark-skinned. They are more looking like any kind of, say, German person or like that. But they have this lifestyle of the gypsies, to put it that way, having typically, say, having often done earlier times with horses, going from place to place, and also being quite good in music. And also they have a very strong tradition for psychic phenomena, just as the Roma or the gypsy people with, you know, tarot cards and crystal boats and so. That is so. It's kind of parallel community, at least in Norway, to the gypsies. But you can see there is a kind of, to put it that way, racial difference between. But they also have a language that is quite, say, close to the gypsy language. The Roma or gypsy language is called Romanes, but the traveler language in Norway is called Romani. But many same words. So.
But the tradition runs through them, and the psychic tradition,
yes.
and these arts run. That's what I was trying to make sure that I understood what you were using at traveler. So correct. I find it really fascinating that, like, your family had these gifts, and that your mother was able to know when your father was coming home.
Grandmother and grandfather.
Grandmother was able to know when your grandfather was. Do you have any of these gifts yourself?
Well,
You've experienced.
I will say yes, but so have you, and so of course you know you have. But you know, from the model of the mental internet, we are all logged onto the mental internet. So from that metaphor follows that we all have these abilities to a larger or lesser degree. So it's talent and training. So the talent seems to run in families. Some families, just like music, you know, some families have very strong gifts for music, and of course that also to some extent goes together with the tradition of training those talents. So with the psychic abilities, it runs in the families, and I think seems to be our family has a bit stronger than the average, at least. But as I said, we all have it, and I discussed this with a couple of American psychics, and both of them, those had say received the gifts after near-death experiences. One after drowning, and the other after a car crash, being clinically dead for some minutes and coming back and suddenly finding themselves psychic. So it is there for all of us, but somehow there must be some. Very often this is a crisis, or you have done meditation, or you have a deep, profound dream. And so there must be something that a bit put your filters on a vacation in a way, so you can be open to the information that is there all the time. But it could be quite disturbing having, like, listening to 10 different radio stations at the same time. So you have to somehow cultivate the ability to deal with this vast sphere of information.
You know, it's very, very interesting because I am psychic. And
Yes.
years I would go to psychics and they'd say, well, John, you know, you should be on our side of the table.
Yes.
And I got all excited, you know, thinking that was great. But what I realized is that unless you open yourself up actually to it
Yes.
or listen. So for me, it began when I used to see like a little choo-choo train going by with one word on it. And it
Yes.
would be the weirdest word.
Mm.
Okay, just the weirdest word like seashell or rock or something.
Mm.
And I learned to say it. If I said
Yes.
the word to my client, it
Yes.
opened up the door. If I didn't
Understand.
say it, like
Mm.
if I didn't say it, then nothing would
Mm.
open up. And
Understand.
so it's almost like you have to, and I heard Alan Steinfeld mention it the other day, you have to trust what comes
Mm.
to you immediately, because that's
Yes.
usually the answer. And if
Mm.
you have the courage to say it,
Yes.
then somehow you're in the, is that, so that's kind of how I'm experiencing what you're saying, that there's
I
this awareness.
I fully understand. I will give a good example. I probably will be allowed to show my book here.
Oh,
Will I not?
yes, please show
Yes.
it.
This is my book. It's quite beautiful, isn't it?
It looks very fat. Wait a
It
minute.
it is quite fat. After all, it's a short history about nearly everything paranormal, so it must have some fatness to it.
It
But
must have a lot.
a friend of mine here in our little town, Mandel, he is a footballer, and he is a kind of rational guy, and he's not into the psychic stuff at all. But he likes me, and because I wrote this book, he read the book. And what happened then? Suddenly he was walking towards, he was owning a kiosk here, and he was going to his kiosk, and suddenly there appeared a picture in his inner mind, and the picture was of a common friend of ours. And this common friend of ours, he had been wearing a big full beard is it called, with mustache, and you know, a big beard for many months. But suddenly in a picture my friend received, this guy was shaven. He had just shaven his face, and that had not happened for many months. Well, my friend went to his kiosk, and after a couple of hours this common friend appeared, shaven totally, no beard at all. So, and he was quite shocked because he had never seen that kind of inner picture before, you know. And suddenly he found himself psychic, being able to know in advance that this friend had shaved for the first time in many months. So he was quite shocked, and I said, there you see, that's how it works. You train your awareness to become, you know, a bit more sensitive to what goes on there all the time, and then suddenly these things of information pops up. So, and you can cultivate this with meditation, exercise, and everything. You could also use psychedelics if you are into that, but then you should use it together with a serious therapist, not just dabble into it. That is my recommendation. But many people, I know some quite say experienced old hippies here in town, and they have told me about strong experiences related to psychedelics, doing together with shamans down in Mexico and such things. But I will not recommend that. But I can recommend yoga, meditation, and different kind of exercises. Also, binaural beats, brain entrainment by these audio tapes that somehow makes your consciousness change gear and be more receptive towards this vast field of information. And also, I would say, following Carl Gustav Jung, that these phenomena tend to appear more often if you are in a, say, profound and an existential personal process. So I would of course, these phenomena are interesting, but if they are to become more than interesting, if they are to work as guides and signposts along the way, you should engage in a kind of spiritual practice, or say really ask for what is the meaning of my life, why am I here, you know, the big questions. They will often be asked within transpersonal psychology, for instance, because then these phenomena is just not, oh, curious, you know, funny or a bit scary and chilling or like that. It's become very meaningful, can become meaningful guides on your personal way and process. So I recommend, say, asking the serious questions here and not just being into it for the fun of it, which can be a start, of course, which was my start. But, you know, at a point in time, you have to become serious about your life. And then these phenomena take on another meaning, or at least may take on another meaning.
Well, yes, it does take on another meaning. You're saying that we can actually tap into this mental internet and have
Yes.
the answers to all things. We could connect
In
with each
principle.
other in principle, and some people do it better than others because
Yes.
they're trained or they have those kinds of skills.
Mm.
So because this is such a personal experience, how then does it translate into the scientific community then? You know, do you, like, you're a researcher, are there other paranormal researchers? What happens, you know, is this all discounted, what we're doing here? Like, how does that translate here?
Of course, the tradition in modern times has not been very open to these phenomena, but things have been happening. There are quite a number of quantum physicists being open to these phenomena. Most famous today is probably Nobel Prize winning Brian Josephson, professor in Cambridge University. He won the Nobel Prize in physics in 1973. He is also an experienced meditator. He used to follow this old Indian Vedanta tradition in the version of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was the yogi, the guru for the Beatles and for David Lynch, and quite a number of, say, cultural icons in the West. Brian Josephson, he is a genius in physics, and he has written, you can go to his website on Cambridge University, and you will find also links to articles about psychic phenomena. He's quite convinced at least telepathy and also psychokinesis influencing, say, the physical world with your mind over matter. He's convinced, and also thinks that some interpretations of quantum physics is, say, are allowing for these phenomena. Also, the first version of my book, it was released by a small publishing house called Pari Publishing, which was founded by a British quantum physicist called David Peat. David Peat was quite ingenious. He was from Liverpool, and also was professor in physics in Canada. And also he was working together for a period with Sir Roger Penrose, who won the Nobel Prize in physics in 2020. So in the physics community, there are quite a number of people being open to this. Joan, the picture of you is disappearing from our screen here.
I'm right here. I wanted to give you
Okay.
full screen because I
Okay.
just
Okay.
love what you're saying. So if
Okay.
I go off, it's just because I want to give you
Okay.
full
Okay.
reign.
I wondered if we had lost connection. So, as I said, David Peat working together with Sir Roger Penrose, and also David Peat worked together with other great physicists called David Bohm. And David Bohm is famous for this holographic principle that the world can be viewed as a hologram, where each little part contains information about all other parts. In a metaphor, you could say the droplet mirrors the universe. And David Bohm did also lots of parapsychological experiments and were convinced about the reality of these phenomena. So there we have at least 3 great physicists being open or say believing in these phenomena. Also, I used to refer to an article from a quite famous psychologist, Professor Etzel Cardenha. Etzel Cardenha is from Mexico originally, but is tenured in Sweden at Lund University, which is quite high on the international rankings. And Professor Cardenha, he wrote in 2018, wrote an article. It's called The Experimental Evidence for Parapsychological Phenomena. And that article was not published in just a kind of local journal. No, it was published in the flagship of the American Psychological Association. In the May issue of American Psychologist. There you can find this article of Professor Etzel Cardenha. And this journal is usually considered to be the most prestigious journal in the world. So when people say, oh, there are no evidence for these phenomena, they are totally wrong. So you can go to American Psychologist, this famous journal, and check out the May issue in 2018. The article is called The Experimental Evidence for Parapsychological Phenomena, and it's written by Professor Etzel Cardenha. And it's lots and lots and lots of references to different experiments and so. What he concludes is, yes, many of these phenomena are in fact supported by experimental evidence. But no, we have not yet reached an explanatory model that everybody can agree about. So that is, I would say, a kind of open-minded scientific standing towards these phenomena today.
Interesting, because it can't, I mean, to be scientific, it has to be repeatable, right?
Yes.
So we have to be able to all experience the same kind of thing or over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know that our military, the US military, use psychics, right? They train psychics too. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because if it
Yes,
gets to the
yes.
military, we know it's working.
Yes. Again, in my book here, in the chapter 2, I write the whole chapter is dedicated to the theme you now mentioned. And that is a project run by originally it was a kind of civilian project, but it was classified and then say managed by the US military and also by CIA. It's usually referred by the code name Stargate, and it ran say about from 1975 to 1995. And the thing was to try to use clairvoyance for spy espionage purposes. So if a spy in the US would be able to say describe the movements of say Russian troops or any kind of military sensitive information, that could be quite beneficial. So they trained lots of earlier soldiers in that, and they found quite great success for their experiments. And I read reports from both the soldiers themselves, the officers, and also some brilliant physicists involved in that work. And also the program was evaluated after, say, have been running about 20 years. And they had two external, psychologists, professors to evaluate. And one of those professors, Jessica Utt, she's professor in statistics. Jessica Utts, professor in statistics, and also author of lots of textbooks in statistics. She concluded it's overwhelming evidence for these phenomena. The other, doing the assessment was a professor in psychology. His name is Ray Hyman, and he is a skeptic, professional skeptic. And he had to admit there are something going on here that cannot be accounted for by just statistical flukes or coincidence. But he felt it was too early to conclude that something paranormal had been going on. After all, he's a professional skeptic, so that was somehow what he had to say. But at least he admitted that something more than just statistical flukes or coincidence are going on here. But it could be some undetected errors or some kind of dirty test tubes, as he expressed it, or something like that. So that was the official evaluation of this project. But the military, of course, and CIA, they are not into these things just for doing fun science. They are into the military usefulness for this. And they found that, okay, these phenomena might be real, but it's a bit unstable. We cannot we cannot put 100,000 soldiers at risk based on this information. Perhaps the psychic had slept not so well this night and become a bit confused about his or her own prejudices and such things. So the conclusion was kind of open-ended, but as I said, all the people involved in the project concluded it's real, but a bit unstable, and therefore somehow we could perhaps not base big military decisions on it. Yeah.
Kind of disappointing. So that's what we call remote viewing, that these psychics were trained in. And of course, I never thought of remote viewing as a paranormal experience. So I'm having quite an awakening with this. But I thought that even though they've sort of, for public dissemination, they've said it was unstable, it was my understanding that they're actually still using psychics or remote viewing in other ways. They just don't want us to know.
I asked a professional remote viewer about that, English. He's called, his name is Daz Smith, and he's an excellent viewer. He ran a company using these abilities within the financial markets these days. And he thought it might be running still programs, but what he then thought, because he knows some of the great guys that had been working within Stargate, and from his perception was that these guys were not involved in that kind of work anymore. If the work is still going on, it's probably outsourced to smaller groups and be kept very secret. That could be, he said, but he did not know about these programs running still in, say, under the auspices of the CIA or so. Yeah.
So it's so interesting because it is such a valuable skill, and it is in the right hands, it is really accurate. And you could prove. I had this crazy experience where I was in a plant medicine ceremony and I saw writing on about 5 people's foreheads. Okay, writing.
Oh, yes.
Now I want to, you don't have a camera in your head if you're on plant medicine. So when I went home, I told a friend of mine, I described it to my friend, and one of the people whose forehead I saw the writing on was in the room. And this friend was a remote viewer. Yes. I said, can you draw out what I saw and then translate? And he did. He actually translated it. I couldn't believe it, that I saw on a piece of paper exactly what I had seen in a psychedelic state.
Oh,
and then he translated it. And so, how do you explain that kind of phenomenon?
Well, that kind of, as I said, if we go back to the metaphor of the mental internet, the information is there. And if you think something, feel something, know something, remember something, it's all there. And being in this setting you describe, probably people are much more in tune with the psychic world. You are not out in the street with cars honking and the horns and that kind of noise. You are somehow focusing on the mental things. So the information is there, and to me it is what is information in the last resort. That's of course a difficult and very profound question, but to me all information is in principle available to all people at all times, in principle.
And we can train ourselves to do this.
Yes.
So I know that you mentioned, or some people that claim that Cleopatra's lost palace was recovered, and the Richard III's burial place were recovered by using clairvoyance. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, what you mentioned about this Cleopatra's palace, that was found by Stefan Schwartz, and he is an experienced psychic researcher, and he brought to Alexandria, which is a harbor city of Egypt, alongside the Mediterranean, and he brought 11 psychics with him. And he has written about it. It's called The Alexandria Project. Exciting book, I can recommend. And two of those viewers were really excellent. George McMullen and Hella Hamid. She had been working within this Stargate program. And they did not use only, say, normal divers, but they made maps and using the psychics to pinpoint where the divers should go to find the different kind of items, ancient items. And they found lots and lots of items, and these finds are confirmed by the leading archaeologist of Alexandria at that time, a Polish guy, a professor with such a complicated name I cannot remember, but I write about it in my book. And it's confirmed and also filmed, these finds. So it's not just mumbo jumbo from a guy that want to believe something. It's really documented with film and a professional archaeologist. So that is a stunning, say, example of using psychics to make archaeological finds. And also a more spontaneous case was in Britain just a few years ago, because a very famous quote from a Shakespeare play, Richard III, is "My horse, my kingdom for a horse," and that is, uttered by King Richard III before quite a short time before he is killed. And Richard III was a historical person, not just a protagonist in Shakespeare's play, but his body or his skeleton had disappeared for several hundred years. But and say his branch his branch of royalty was somehow superseded by the Tudors, Edward. What is called Henry VIII, the guy who killed all his wives, and then the great Queen Elizabeth I, and that family took over. But Richard families, they were somehow written out of history, more or less, or at least they were denigrated and slandered about and so. But there has always been people in England somehow being fans of that Richard family, and one of those they have a Richard III Society in England, and one of those was a screenwriter, Scottish screenwriter called Philippa Langley, and she had somehow set out to find Richard's body, which had been disappeared for many hundred years. So she asked some archaeologists where could that be in. Oh yes, it could be in that district, but it's quite a big district, and it also was covered by buildings and asphalt and tarmac and so it was very, very difficult to see anything. You couldn't get subtle clues from the district about the body's whereabouts. But Philippa, she went to the district where the archaeologist had suggested Richard's body may lay, and she went into a parking lot. But as she described it, she felt it was completely dead. But then there was a smaller parking lot quite by, and she had to climb a little chain, you know, to get into that smaller private parking lot. And she went into there, and suddenly she froze. And this was summertime, and she got the chills suddenly, and you know, goosebumps and everything. And she just knew, I'm standing now on Richard's grave. And it become delivered to her as a kind of certainty. And being quite a resourceful person, she was able to start an archaeological excavation, contacting professional archaeologists and so. And they started to dig exactly where she had made this X, you know, here is Richard's grave. And 1 meter, 3 feet below the surface, they found a skeleton. And you know, today we are in the lucky situation we can use DNA technology and scan gene material and so. And there was a living branch of Richard's family still alive, from Richard's sister, Anne of York. So they took samples from the bones in the skeleton they have found and compared that with living relatives on the branch stemming from Richard's sister, Anne of York. And what they found was it was a 99.99% hit. So it is absolutely sure this was Richard. And even they have a big burial ceremony in 2015 in the Cathedral of Leicester, where he was put to rest as the rightful king of England of that time. So quite impressive example.
Yes, very, very impressive example. I know a lot of dowsers. So up until today, I wouldn't have thought that this was paranormal, you know, materials. And I know a lot of dowsers and some who are water witches who have that ability to go and find wells, and they can tell you how they do a combination of holding the rods, and then they can use the pendulum to find out exactly how deep. So this is part of the same then phenomenon.
You know, as I said, the information is there. So it's just how you tap that information. You can tap it with dowsing rods, with pendulum, with tarot cards, with crystal bowls, with tea leaves, with burned knuckles. You know, there's so many. So it's just to somehow tap into this information and make it available to the conscious mind. So that's all these divinator techniques are mainly people somehow tend to make a fetish out of the pendulum, out of the tarot cards, out of the crystal bowl, of course, because it delivers so important things. It's natural somehow to get emotional about it. But basically, these things are just means. The information is the main thing. So how we don't really need those means. If you are able, we can just get say pictures in our heads if we are clever enough, but it's often more simple to how many times does the pendulum turn around and so on. Then it's somehow easily available to our conscious mind.
Yeah, it's a tool that just you use to access, and you can ask questions. So it does. So this is so interesting. You're saying there's a lot of ways we can tap into the mental internet, but yet for good. And I'm thinking though that people can abuse it. Like I'm curious, like I know that there's, you know, the frightening aspect of it, or the control aspect, and then society in general and scientists don't want you to use this. Why don't they want us to know that we have this ability to tap into universal consciousness?
Well, it's on many levels, these things. As I said, I was part of Christian youth club when I was young, and they were quite weary about these phenomena because they could be from the devil in a way. So of course they don't you want to associate with the devil, so therefore you should shy away from these phenomena. And it makes sense in a way, because a girl I was dating at that time, she had quite some say terrifying experience with this. I will not go into this, but it is what you can see in many American high school movies, you know, people trying to perform rituals, you know, being totally unprepared for any kind of answers and that kind of stuff, you know. So, and I think it's a healthy skepticism about that. So therefore, many people somehow totally close off this. And from the scientific part, this has been part of obscurantism, you know, a part of irrationalism and all that kind of non-scientific, not being interested in facts, just being interested in what the skeptics call woo-woo, you know, people, as I said, taking LSD and having visions interesting to them, but probably not relevant for other people and that kind. So it's part of irrational subcultures, you know. So of course, and there's quantum physicists I mentioned earlier in the program, they were quite skeptical, but it's possible to be skeptical and open as well, you know. So, but that has not been, to put it that way, many people in the alternative community are not very interested in scrutiny about their phenomena, because it's also lots of mumbo jumbo out there. We have to admit that. I have interviewed close to about 100 professional psychics, and many are for real, and many are what kind a bit deluded about their own abilities. They want to help, you know, and but they don't know that somehow bad sleep or lack of eating or personal prejudices and so distort the information. So I have found many psychic being not very conscious about say the sources of faults in the information. So that might be also, you know, we have a kind of a scientific journalist working in Norwegian national television, and he has tested some psychics with very meager results, to put it that way. And as I said, many are a bit deluded about their own abilities. So it's a balance, you know. As I said, I have interviewed so many, and also this great guy I told you about, this old traveler, he also have bad days at the work. And also my personal counselor, psychic counselor, she can be excellent, but I always ask her before we start, are you psychic today? So yes, because
well, that's a good question.
Yes, and the openness varies quite a lot. And the most impressive psychic I ever met, that was back in 1989, and she recorded 2 audio cassettes for me. And it's so stunning over the years how much what has turned out exactly with details as she predicted. But she said also, some days there will not appear any pictures to me, and then I have to cancel the deals. And but people do not understand that. So then I just say I'm sick. That they understand, because they think if you are psychic and if you're really good psychic, you're always open. That is not the case. And it's just Beethoven. He was not always composing. Sometimes he was just eating, you know, out for work. It doesn't mean that he was not able to compose, but he was not composing all the time, even not him, you know. So even if you're a psychic genius, you're not always psychic. So that is also part of why you should be, as I said, open, but also, I don't like the word skeptic, but you also a bit, you know, have your kind of, don't put your critical sense totally to rest also. So that is very difficult to explain to people, but because they say either you're psychic 100% of the time or this is just bogus. But the truth, I used the metaphor in my book. If you have an excellent baseball hitter, you don't expect him or her to hit all the times. You know, they will not 100% of the times, but they will hit more often than the average person.
God, years ago, I had a boyfriend that was psychic, and I used to test him all the time, and I would sit there and have him visualize, like, what am I looking at, you know,
yes.
and I'd be looking at a lamp,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, it was both exciting and scary, because, but I think the scary was that I was taught that this was not right, you know, and yet
Yes.
I know in my heart that this is really right. My favorite book in college was Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain.
Yes,
When
I know that very well. Yes.
it was my first introduction to the psychic phenomenon. So
Mm.
one of the things I'm curious about, I read years ago researching my book on miracles. I looked at, in the Middle Ages, they talked about in the monasteries, that there were many monks who had this ability to do
yes.
several things. They could actually raise up in the air, so they could, I guess, teleport themselves.
Yes.
and lift up off the ground. And they were also, there were so many I read that were able to manifest bread from wheat and wine from water, that it no longer was a miracle according to the Catholic Church. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, these phenomena, physical manifestation, are of course very much contested. But take an example from modern times. We don't need to go to the Middle Ages. You know, in Italy, you have Padre Pio. He was a Capuchino monk, and he have several times he was witnessing rising levitation while holding mass for his congregation. So that is lots of witnesses, and he passed away, I think it was 1975 or thereabout, you know. So lots of witnesses about this phenomena. It's also, you know, yeah. Yes, excuse me.
I didn't think of it as phenomenon, and that's what I'm realizing. That's called phenomenon when people can do that kind of work. Then.
But he was not interested in doing that just for show, you know. It just seemed to happen. But he also was famous for what is called a bilocation. He was, you know, we're speaking in the occult term, he was able to project his astral body to other places, you know. So he was living in a monastery in Italy, and it was, I don't remember, it was in Latin America. There was a bishop laying on his deathbed. And suddenly appeared the vision to him of Padre Pio standing alongside his bed, you know. And he also even wrote a note, Padre Pio has been here, you know. So he was able to project his astral body to visit, to somehow care for people when he felt they were in need of his presence in a way. So that kind of phenomenon, there's so many of them. I've met people, I can, from Kristiansand, close to where I live, he was out on the field. He was a farmer. He was out on the field and, you know, with the tractor and plowing. And he went to the end of the field. There was a kind of what is called a steep hill, you know, where you could fall down. It was about 9 meters down there. And he get to close to the edge, so that the tractor fell over, you know, and the tractor fell 9 meters down. Blood, dum, 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 bang. And he also was falling, and then poof, like landing on a soft pillow of air. After a fall of 9 meters, he was not hurt at all. Not a blue mark, not a scar, not anything.
Wow.
Yeah, that is what they used to call, you know, angel guard in Norway. So something receiving him in a way. That could also be seen as a kind of spontaneous levitation in a way, because it seemed to defy the law of gravity in a way. So that I could go on with lots of stories,
Right,
you know.
right.
Yes.
It's like the hand of God was, or the hand of an angel. And so there's so many inter parallels here.
Yes,
I find it definite. Even Jesus then, if he was able to, quote, manifest wine from water and, you know, bread from wheat, then that's a form of what you're calling manifestations.
Yes, there are. I'm. Excuse me. Yes.
Miracles are manifestations, is what
yes,
you're part of this kind of phenomenon.
Yes. There are, I'm a bit, you know, you probably know Sai Baba and all these Indian gurus. And so, many of those claiming to do those phenomena are not, in my opinion, at least, able to do it. But on the other hand, some of these phenomena are confirmed by, for instance, Professor Stanley Krippner. He has been working with shamans in Mexico and also in Brazil. And there's a quite famous Brazilian medium. Professor Krippner did lots of experiments, but then suddenly coins coming out of the air, you know, small pebbles falling from the floor, you know, and that has been many times. And Professor Krippner, he has written 40 books and quoted in the best journals in the world. So he is not just a bogus man. He is the real thing. So there are, but of course, as I said, lots of bogus there, but also lots of real things. But if to put the Jungian question, Carl Gustav Jung also himself experienced that several of those phenomena. For instance, suddenly a tree was split from the top to the root. He was standing close by. A tree was just opening like that, you know. And also he experienced there was a knife in his drawer that suddenly exploded to many pieces, you know. So that is impressive. A big tree, you know, suddenly split open. But still, we have to ask what is the meaning of this phenomena. Also, Matthew Manning, the famous British healer, if you read his two first books, it's called The Link and The Spirits. So many physical manifestations. Each day, cutlery flowing through the air, through the living room, you know, big shelves moving by themselves, you know, burning circles in the walls and so. But what it is all about, what is the meaning of this? And Matthew Manning was quite, you know, dismayed by this because, okay, it's a phenomenal, strong phenomenon, but the meaning. So then he started to do automatic writing and then painting and then eventually healing. And he felt that when he started to do healing, these phenomena stopped because they were quite chaotic, destroying furniture, you know, and scaring guests and everything. So he had to channel the force the right way into healing. Then this chaos stopped. It's the same force, but in a chaotic version. So he preferred much and felt he served the Great Spirit much better, say, channeling the force in an orderly fashion and healing cancer patients and everything, you know. So people get a bit too hung up about the phenomena themselves instead of asking, what good can I do for the world with these phenomena?
I love this. So, you know, we're almost at the end of the interview. Is there anything else you want people to know about your work? Like, do you actually work as a practitioner, or are you really mainly the researcher, speaker? And how can people find you?
Well, let's start with the book then. Then it's here. It's a short history of nearly everything paranormal by Terje Simonsen, and it's easily found on Amazon, British Amazon, American Amazon, German Amazon, French Amazon, Amazon. Terje Simonsen or Simonsen, if that is more easy to remember. Yes, you know, I feel I'm very much into the Jungian perspective. You know, I feel there is a task you have to somehow listen to the deep forces and try to follow that where that leads you in a way. So it's an existential project. Of course, it's a research project, but also existential project. And some people say I have some abilities in healing. They feel that I've started massaging them. Suddenly the pain they have been a shoulder being bad for 3 months. Suddenly it's good afterwards, you know. So there might be something there. And I certainly have lots of telepathic and clairvoyant and also precognition, you know, seeing the future quite a lots of times in dreams and also during wake. So I'm kind of practitioner, but as I said, I asked the Jungian question, what is the meaning with it and how can you serve your community, your friends, you know, the world and so. So I think, as I said, not just being into the phenomena, but the bigger picture, how the Buddhists have lots to learn us there. They discern, you know, these phenomena can be helpful, but they can also be distractions. So I try to be existential about my life and how can I serve the totality, serve the universe or the great spirit, or how you want to pronounce that. Yes, what should I say more? The book has received 2 awards in the US, the Parapsychological Book Award, which is quite prestigious. Some people call it the Nobel Prize of Parapsychology, and it's also received a Nautilus Award, which is also prestigious, but I think the Parapsychological Book Award is somehow the most up there in a way. So I think it's a good book and it's entertaining. Lots of good stories about celebrities, and it's funny book. I try to entertain and not just. There is not one equation and not one graph in the book. So
you are a wealth of information. Very fascinating, and I think your book is definitely a must read. And I'm discovering that I'm actually a paranormalist, that I didn't even know it.
Okay, that's great to hear. If I may say, Dean Radin, who many of our viewers probably know, he has recommended this book strongly, said there is no better choice, he has said. And he has written some quite excellent book himself. So
It's interesting. I thought of him when we started, when you said your grandmother knew when your grandfather was coming home a half an hour ahead, and that was Dean's research was on dogs who would actually go to the door and wait for their masters.
yes.
They would know exactly when they were coming home. And that's what I was thinking of Dean's book when you were talking about your grandfather and grandmother. Great work, just great work breaking down such a complex subject that really leaves me with the idea that each of us have this ability to tap into this internet, this mental internet.
Yes, that is somehow my stock in trade. I do not understand why not anyone else have coined this concept, because to me it's somehow, suddenly at least, it was obvious in a way. But
I'm going to be talking about it too.
Beautiful, thank you.
I like it. I like it. It explains exactly what kind of a way that we can all tap into. We can all, so you've done a great job.
Thanks a lot, John.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you for all your work, and definitely making this more palatable, and making us realize that the paranormal is normal.
Yes,
really,
that's a good slogan.
This is the realm now. We're understanding the subatomic world. We're understanding that that there's multiple dimensions. So individuals like you are really pioneering the work for the people that have been kind of like on this level of linearity for quite some time, to realize there is so much more to our potential. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Neil, for the good words.
My pleasure. All right, take
really
care, brother.
Appreciate your insights. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.